There we go. Okay. So thank you. I know it was a bit last minute arranging this session, but we had our strategy meeting on the 3rd of December, and we thought it would be a nice way to round out the year, given that we've postponed our normal stakeholder meeting to Linear Pelly. We thought we'd just put this little roundup in to tide us over as a warm-up for the meeting in February. So without further ado, the agenda, I'm going to hand over to Reg in a few moments to welcome you all. Reg is our new chair of the advisory board. And then we're going to take a little bit of a look at our achievements this year, benchmarking. Stuart will then take us through what's been happening with the transition of the division to SLF auditing services and the accreditation progress this year. And then I'll wrap up with a little bit of a review of the project work that we've been doing, particular focus on EUDR and the work of the traceability cluster, because I think that's paramount at the moment. And then we'll touch on a little bit of where we're going to be next year and what we're going to be focusing on. So as I mentioned, we did have our strategy meeting on the 3rd of December. And at that meeting, our chairman of 5 years nearly, Hans, stepped down. As you all know, Hans left the industry a couple of years ago, but he was still very much supporting the work of the foundation, but took the decision around about August, September time that this would be his last year with us. So thankfully, I spoke with Reg and he very kindly agreed to come on board. And with that, Reg, perhaps I can hand over to you to say a few words.
Yep, sure. Obviously, I think first off, it's right for me to pay tribute to Hans because he did a fantastic job over that time, and he's a hard act to follow. And the commitment I would make is to do the best that I can, I think. Um, Secondly, it's nice to see so many ex-colleagues, friends from around the world on the call. So to everybody who I know, who knows me, hello, good to see you again. For those who don't know me, a little quick potted history. Started in the industry back in 1972. Seems like a lifetime ago. Up in Liverpool tanning. So I'm a leather maker by trade and training. 18 years there and then 35 years with Pittards here in the UK. Pittard sadly got into difficulties in at the end of 2023, but several of the management team have acquired the brand, the Ethiopian businesses, and we are working hard to get it going again if we possibly can. I think underneath all of that, for the people in the industry who's been around a bit, we are all very aware that sustainability is the key message these days. Consumer awareness, brand awareness, supply chain transparency. So we're all very, very committed. It's a nice word, but it's very hard to define and it's very hard to communicate properly. And I certainly respect all the work that Deborah and the team have done in showing a pathway as to how to link all the key components up in a way that's meaningful to consumers at the end. So that's about it from me, really.
Thanks, Reg. Good. Okay. Right. Let's move on with a little overview of some of the work that we've been doing. And just a quick snapshot, really, of our year in numbers. Even though it has been a tough year this year for most organizations in the industry, we're fortunate that we have seen an uptake of partners that are now engaged with us. And you can see there our active partners are now up at 126, up 32 on last year. And alongside that, we've engaged additional countries into the work that we're doing. Some of that engagement has been through the project work, which we'll talk about later on. So regions like other countries in Africa and Indonesia that have come on board, but it's good news. Audits, we've now done 126 audits around the world. And our transparency dashboards have also increased to 98 that are published. Some of the nuances behind that, we do have 14 dashboards now that are product manufacturers. And this is part of our remit of extending the engagement through that supply chain, so we're not just looking at the tanneries, but we are engaging other ends of the supply chain as well. So we do have 14 product manufacturers now on the dashboard. And other numbers related to that is 42 of the dashboards that we have do not have any connection to LWG, i.e. they haven't got an environmental audit already. And of that 42, 7 of those organizations have done some environmental certification with us. And that number will increase significantly next year, because the bottom box that you can see here, the preliminary assessment visits in 2025, we've done 17 of them. And those 17 will convert next year into audits. And part of that audit will be environmental certification. So we are starting to, I'm just going to admit someone else. So we are starting to now gain traction across auditing in all areas, not just the social, but also environmental and of course governance. And then finally, speaker events, 15 external events that SLF have spoken at this year, which is great news, because the more we can speak and get the message out there, the more we can help people to understand what we're all about, what the vision is, and how we're going about things. So if we look at that in a bit more detail, I talked about the country coverage up from 28 to 35 countries this year. There's a little bit of a snapshot there. You can see the darker green on here are where we have more partners. And significantly, this little dark green patch here is Bangladesh. And part of that is through the work of the SMEP project that we'll talk about in the project part of the session today. But you can see that reach is spreading now quite nicely across most regions of the world. So that's pleasing to see, and we hope that'll continue next year. And then if we look at our partnership type, what you can see is that we have gained in most areas, the exception being the chemical companies. So that's something that we need to consider this year, what we're doing there, because we were making great progress with the chemical companies, and that seems to have stalled at the moment. I'm assuming that that is part of this environment that we're in at the moment, this difficult economic climate that we're all working within. But you can see there, we've got a good cross section. The primary focus, of course, being with the leather manufacturers and the product manufacturers. And I mentioned the dashboard increase. So it's a 29% increase in the number of transparency dashboards. What you can see is we've now got more that are published. We did have a few that were unpublished dashboards that we were piloting. These have now converted and they're now published. So the uptick there continues in a really steady way, which is what we want to see. We'd like to see it grow a little bit faster, but slow and steady often wins the race. So we're quite happy with that. This is the one that looks like the anomaly. We've actually had a decrease in the number of audits conducted. And there are 2 reasons for this. One, as I mentioned, those preliminary inspection visits, we've done a lot of preliminary work this year that should have also resulted in the audits being conducted this year. And for one reason and another, which I won't go into now, but that's been postponed. So those audits will actually take place in next year. So it will right itself. But coupled alongside that, we did have some tanneries that have not renewed their audits, and that's not just with us, that's with other certification companies as well, and it's a direct result of the pressures that everybody is facing right now. So a couple of facilities are no longer with us, and a couple of facilities decided that they weren't going to re-audit a facility, and it could be a group. So there are a couple of instances where we did 2 or 3 sites for a facility, and this year we only did 1. So they're rationalising what they do and where they move their production to fit in with the economic climate. So although this is the one that looks like it's a downturn, in reality it's not, and it will right itself next year. But we do have to be really cognizant of the difficulties that our tanneries are facing right now. So in summary, we have seen continued growth in spite of the depressed market in 2025. We're not expecting any huge recovery in 2026. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty around, but we're hoping that we will at least continue with our steady growth. As I mentioned, our audit numbers will catch up in 2026 with the PAVs that we've done. So there'll be actually 17. The last slide shows 16, but there's been another one since I prepared that. So there'll be 17 PAVs resulting in audits next year. And I think overall, we are providing valuable support in key geographies that hasn't been there before. And I think that's why we're seeing growth in numbers that are not in the traditional biome when we think about certification. And we also believe that there's huge potential for long-term enablement of continued improvement. Kashif, can you mute yourself? Thank you. Oh, maybe I can mute you. Yeah, so we do believe that there is huge potential for continued improvement across the value chain, but especially within those high producing, low income regions where support hasn't necessarily always been available. And that is primarily a two-pronged approach, our AIM approach, but also the investment of some of the project work that we've been doing, which has been made possible by the funders that are providing the resource to enable that. So does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next item? You just raise your hand if you do. No? Good. Okay. Well, in that case, I will hand over to Stuart to take you through the auditing services and accreditation update. Stuart.
Thank you, Deborah. Just a little bit of context before I get into accreditation. I think it's worth a reminder that SLF Auditing Services began its operation as a separate entity from the beginning of this year. So it's still new in that sense, though obviously the auditing and the activities were ongoing prior to that. I formally joined to support the auditing services back in May, with both a focus on the accreditation and the actual auditing services. The primary aim, obviously, aligning all our procedures and policies with the accreditation requirements of what we've now confirmed as will be ISO 17065 standard. Deborah, next slide, please. Thank you. For accreditation, there's 2 key components. One is the scheme and the other is the certification body. And this is aligned to the segregation between the 2 entities. So Sustainable Leather Foundation is the scheme owner. It owns the certification scheme. SLF, and that should be auditing services, I think, not assurance services, is the certification body, which undertakes the audits and issues the certification. So both components to that are important for the accreditation. And just a reminder that currently there are no certification schemes specifically for the leather sector which do have a formal accreditation. So the aim is that SLF and the scheme will be the first accredited scheme for the leather industry. So for the scheme is evaluated, and it's against 2 key parameters. The first is, are the requirements set by the scheme for the certification and what's expected of the certification body, are they robust and credible? And ISO 17067, which is not an actual certification standard or accreditation standard, provides the guidelines for the requirements and expectations of any certification scheme. What have we done to date? In terms of the scheme, we submitted an initial set of scheme documents, and that includes all the scheme requirements, what the scheme would expect in terms of auditor qualifications, auditing arrangements, what's expected of the certification body as a generic certification body, rather than being written specific to SLF auditing services. While there's no current expectation that additional certification bodies would be appropriate, it is being structured in a way such that if that became appropriate, the scheme would be able to support it. So that initial set of documents was submitted to UCAS, which is the UK Accreditation Service. Being a UK-based organisation, that's the accreditation service that would be used. Submitted the formal evaluation application, and in November we had the initial feedback on those scheme documents, which, next slide please, Deborah, which overall they were happy with the format, presentation and structure of the documents. Of course, there were some recommendations which included consolidation to reduce the actual number of individual documents. We'd structured a lot of it as individual documents, which includes the standards. So for the environmental standards, for example, they are actually all presented as, I think it's 13 individual documents, one for each section: energy, noise, water, etc. We have, for the purposes of the UCAS evaluation, consolidated those into a single document. So one for environmental, one for all the social requirements, and one for the governance requirements. They do still, and they are still published on the website as independent documents and can be referenced independently. The feedback included ensuring there was separation between what are requirements and what are guidelines. For the accreditation and the evaluation, what they're concerned with is the requirements that the scheme sets, both for certification and certification bodies. We've got some refinement to do on wording to ensure that we are only using the wording that we're specifying as should, shall, and may, rather than anything else that may have been used or is present in any of the documentation. And they wanted some additional information on the credentials of who was involved in the development of the scheme and who interested parties are. And I think the point on the credentials of who was involved is a relevant one, because obviously in the development of the scheme, and particularly the standards, a lot of people were consulted, a lot of people did peer review the documents with subject matter experts for each of the areas. So I think that's something that is good that we will be able to demonstrate. If we go to the next slide, please, Deborah. So in terms of next steps for the scheme part of it, revising and completing the updates to the scheme documentation and providing that additional information. In January, we expect the formal scheme evaluation to be undertaken by UCAS, with the target completion of the scheme evaluation by the end of Q1 next year. I suspect there will probably be a couple of iterations of review with UCAS as we go through that, to ensure that they are happy with what's detailed in the scheme requirements, and that there's nothing contrary to the requirements of 17065, and that what is in there is complementary to that. Going to the other part, the certification body, and it's the certification body, in this case SLF Auditing Services Limited, that will undergo the actual formal accreditation. For the accreditation, it's ensuring alignment with both the requirements set by the scheme, so what we've written in as the scheme requirements, and the requirements of ISO 17065 in the form of documentation. So that goes through audit requests, contracts, both with the clients and the facilities, and also with the auditors who are used for undertaking the audits, the declaration, audit reports, reviews, etc. And aligned to that, the ways of working, both internally within SLF Auditing Services to ensure that there is robust control, both in the processes and in the decision making, particularly around the certification decisions, but also externally, including with SLF as the scheme owner, and ensuring that we can demonstrate segregation and separation of duties between SLF as the scheme owner and SLF Auditing Services as the certification body, which is an important aspect that will, I'm sure, be looked at closely. Go forward one, Deborah. Thank you. So to date, we're working through the initial phase of those documents, ensuring that where necessary they are updated, and where they don't exist, ensuring they are developed to reflect the practices and requirements of the scheme and of ISO. That will continue as we go through Q1 in parallel with the scheme evaluation, with the expectation that we complete that during Q2, and then the formal application and formal accreditation process would start. There will be, and there's an option for a pre-assessment, which is done before the actual formal assessment for accreditation, which we would hope would be late 2026, targeting for the completion of the accreditation process, which includes shadow audits and reviews of all the SLFAS processes, including audit report reviews, certification decisions, etc., to be completed in early 2027. So it's a lengthy process. It will demonstrate the credibility of the scheme and the auditing processes that are being undertaken. That's the summary timeline. So we hopefully complete the scheme evaluation in early 2026. Obviously, the accreditation part for the auditing services going through next year, hopefully with the formal accreditation in Q1 2027. Happy to take any specific questions. Otherwise, I'll hand back to Deborah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Stuart. I mean, I hope this demonstrates that, you know, when we created the standards and benchmarks originally, we did work very closely with experts in each field, in the development of them, the benchmarking and the feedback and the review of them before we published them. But this is the next step to creating something that industry can trust. It's not just something that is something that we've made up. It will have, I mean, it has already, but it will have that backbone of formal accreditation sitting underneath it, which actually will allow the industry to refer to it as legislation improves around greenwashing and communications. This will allow industry to make use of this as a certification scheme in their own communications. So it's a really important piece of work. We always knew it was going to be long term. I think we were hoping that we might get it done by the end of next year, but actually once we've started working with UCAS, we've appreciated that it will take us a little bit longer, just that part of the accreditation process where they have to shadow audits and everything else. So but hopefully you can see we're working hard to do things in the right way, and to give industry something that they can trust and rely on. I haven't seen any hands up, so if that's the case, we will move on and just take you through a little bit of the project work that we've been doing. So we've been quite busy. Aside from the accreditation and all the day-to-day stuff, there is a lot of project work that we're committed to supporting across a number of areas, and you can see them here. I'm going to start with our participation on the European Commission deforestation platform. This platform is made up of member states, commodity association and industry groups, NGOs and other agencies that all have a commodity interest that is within the EUDR list of commodities and byproducts. So whether that's associations looking after rubber or paper, or in our case leather, we all come together, convened in this platform where we have meetings generally every second month. The intent of those meetings is really so that we can inform our industry of what's going on and how things are progressing. Also to try to find ways of allowing our different industries to meet these requirements, because it's one thing creating a regulation, it's quite another enabling people to be able to meet that. And I think that very early on, they realized that they did need to have the engagement of stakeholders. It's also our job to ask questions and to push back on things, and to make sure that the Commission know that we are struggling, or that we have challenges, or that they haven't given us the right information or the right tools to be able to meet the regulation. So it's a really important cross collaboration, and we think it's a really important part of the work that we do. All members have to be on the European Union Transparency Register, and all have to be approved to be on this platform by their country representatives in the member states. So that's an overview of what the platform does, which leads on to the latest update and information that we do have at our disposal. So we've had a couple of amendments and simplification announcements over the last couple of months, but this final round has been voted for just yesterday in Parliament. You can see the votes there. So 405 votes in favour of the simplification that you can see in the red boxes here. And the key changes mean that now everybody has a further 12 months extension. So for large and medium companies who were going to be affected as of the 30th of December this year, that's now pushed back to the 30th of December 2026. For the small and micro companies who were going to be affected 30th of June 26, that's now the 30th of June 2027. So we've got a full 12 months extension no matter where you're starting from. The other big simplification that has been approved is that the due diligence statement, so the actual act of going in and creating a due diligence statement on the information system, will now only be necessary by the first operator who imports or exports to or from the market. So only the first person that does the initial import. So if we have a trader that does the import, they will do the DDS, and any tannery that buys material from that trader will only have to record that DDS number. They won't have to do a DDS themselves, even if they subsequently then export that material back out of the EU. they'll just record the DDS number that the first operator took. And there is now even no responsibility for further downstream operators. So if that tannery then sold material to another tannery, there's no need to keep passing on this DDS number anymore. So only the first operator and the first downstream operator have any direct responsibility now. How that's going to work in the real world, I'm not too sure, but that's the simplification. From the Commission's perspective, that is going to simplify the load on the system, which should make it easier. And that's the primary reason that they've done it. One of the other simplifications that have been made is that if you are a small or micro operator and you are located in a low-risk country, if you are placing commodities that have been grown or raised on your land, you will not have to do a DDS. You will just have to do a one-time due diligence statement. So you'll log onto the system, put in a statement, do it once, and job's done. You'll also not have to necessarily use geo-coordinates. You can just put in your postal address. But the terms around that means that you have to fit this small or micro organisation as set out in the EU accounting terms, and you will have to be in a low risk country, and it will have to be your commodity, not something that you're buying or selling from other people. There is also a simplification review that must take place before April next year, and that review should assess impact and burden of EUDR. Now, one of the things that we have seen in this round of simplifications is the removal of paper products, including printed books, newspapers, and pictures from the Annex 1 of the byproduct commodities. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that we could maybe push to get leather removed from the Annex as well as a byproduct, but we can't guarantee that, and we certainly aren't suggesting that you bank on that happening. But it is possible that in some way, shape or form, there could be additional simplification that could benefit us. We don't think that's particularly likely at the moment, but it's possible. Anyway, this review will take place. And I think the fact that they have recognised the need to take out some of these paper products, so paper itself is still within the regulation, but the end product isn't. And something actually that we were talking about, just was it yesterday? I was talking with Gustavo about this, that actually if we are not going to have leather removed, then maybe we ought to be pushing to have the finished products of leather also included, because then that would extend the responsibility to the brands who are outside of that requirement right now. But that remains to be seen. Those are the latest developments, and obviously we keep you updated. We have been asked to submit any feedback that we want to be considered before the end of January. So if any partners do have any feedback that they want us to put forward, please let me know, and we will put something together so that we can make sure our voices are heard by the end of January. And there will be then further FAQs to be released quickly into the new year to reflect all of these simplifications. So that's our key changes. On the back of that, as you know, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will know that for the last 2 years, so since September 23, I think it was, Gustavo, COTANS convened a group of organisations, NGOs, including the certification bodies that you can see on this slide, to align on minimum essential requirements for traceability in the leather sector. COTANS recognised very quickly that with EUDR and all of the other legislation coming in, we needed to start to help ourselves. And one of the ways that we could do that immediately was by agreeing on these minimum requirements. So over the last 2 years, a core group that comprises the certification bodies that you can see here has worked to, first of all, compare and contrast terms and definitions that we all use, and how we could agree a common set of terms and definitions, which we did. That was the first job that we did. And then to develop a SEN standard, a standard that industry can adopt, knowing that all of the certification bodies will be working to these same set of essential requirements. Now, obviously, EUDR is only relating to bovine material. Traceability has to be consistently approached, whatever material, because that's what's going to benefit the leather industry. So within the standard, we have allowed for 3 levels of traceability. We have level 1, which is basic traceability essentials, no matter what material, no matter where you are sourcing from, that you should include in a traceability system, and the nomenclature, the terminology that you should use within that. Level 2 is traceability that is specific to EUDR. So this is if you know you need to meet the requirements of EUDR, you should look to level 2, which is the level 1 information and more in addition. And then there is level 3, and level 3 is again for any material, but it is if you want to attach enhanced sustainability metrics to that traceability, what you need to do to be able to then add that sustainability credential to the traceability as you pass it through. So the standard has undergone public consultation. It was sent through to the standardization team working group for end of the summer last year, and it went through public consultation. It was ready for publication this month. We were hoping to have it published in time for the enforcement of EUDR, but we then paused it because we knew the simplification was taking place, so we wanted to make sure that the standard still reflected all the latest information. So we have edited the document again. The core team came together a couple of weeks ago to edit again. It has now been back to working group 4. Provisionally, those amendments have been agreed, but there is a next meeting in January. And following that, then there will be another now round of review of the edited work. So our revised anticipated publication date is May 26. And we're still confident that that gives us enough time to get this document out there and get industry working to this same language and this same standard well in advance of the EUDR coming into force next year. It's not designed for EUDR, it's designed for industry for traceability, but it will be very supportive for EUDR, I think it's safe to say. And of course, the next step within that is that the cluster of certification bodies are now working to actively incorporate the standard into their own respective organisation standards. So that's a great piece of work. I think our next step with that will be to see what else we can work on together for the betterment of the industry. But we'll get this one finished first, I think. Gustavo, as we've got you on the call, is there anything that you want to add to that we haven't mentioned?
No, I think you were very comprehensive. I think that you have said it all. Nothing from my side, just to say that indeed it is going to undergo a formal vote at the end of the when we are going to be releasing it in January. And I expect that by April we will have then the finalized standard, published standard in the SEN standard book.
Perfect. Okay, and obviously we'll keep you all up to date as soon as we are able to share it and start working towards it. Okay. The other piece of work that we've been working on in a much less direct way are the UNIDO LCA guidelines. So UNIDO recognised the need for creating a harmonised set of guidelines around the methodologies and allocations and bases for environmental footprint. And they've been working with Spin 360 probably for 18 months, maybe. And within that work, they set up a technical advisory group, TAG, to help with supporting a review work. So SLF are on the technical advisory group. The guidelines themselves have been through 2 rounds of feedback. They are ready for publication, but they are just going through UNIDO internal review and approval before they can publish them. Even with this great body of work, there still remains some debate over allocation rates and bases of allocation. However, the guidelines state what they're taking as the allocation rate. So I guess they can be adapted if somebody chooses to use a different allocation rate. But those are the sorts of things that I think industry still has a bit of work to do in that area. Again, we will keep you up to date as soon as these are ready and available and are published. But another great piece of work with UNIDO, and I think we support UNIDO with their training programs. We recommend the training programs that UNIDO have provided on their leather panel, and we'll continue to work closely with them. A big piece of work this year is the Leather and Hide Council of America training project that we embarked on again in, this was September 24. We embarked on this project. So LHCA received funding from the US Department of Agriculture through these various programs that you can see up here. I won't read them all out, it's a bit of a mouthful. But the funding is specifically designed to enhance their export potential with international markets. So within that, we have a contract with LHCA to deliver training and auditing services to build the capacity for export for them. And within that, we are looking at making sure that facilities that they may be able to export to are meeting the international standards, because what they don't want to be doing is exporting to facilities that aren't necessarily meeting the ideals that we would expect across ESG. So there are 4 targeted regions: Africa, Indonesia, India, and Latin America. And within each of those regions, we are contracted to provide, first of all, a 2-day inception workshop, which takes everybody through the need for this, what it's all about, and how we're going to work with them. And we take them in some detail through the 3 modules of environmental, social, and governance responsibility to really get them to a place where they understand why we're doing this. We then select from the facilities that come to the workshop are not just tanneries, but from the tanneries who come, they are asked to nominate themselves if they wish to be considered for the full programme. And from that list of nominated facilities, we select 8 that we can take through a full programme. And that programme includes, first off, a preliminary assessment visit where we go and visit. We don't ask them to prepare anything. We don't want anything out of the ordinary when we go and assess them first time. We just want to see how they operate now. And that gives us the basis by which we can help them to improve. We then go through a period of guided support, usually a 3 to 6 month period. We give them a report. We then do Zoom calls with them so that we can now support them. Within their report that they get after the first visit, we'll say, look, this is achievable at audit. This you're going to have to work on. This you shouldn't worry about for this time around. And this should be a long-term strategy. So they really get a guided approach to what's possible within the time period that we've got. We then take them through a formal audit under formal audit conditions, and we certify them for as much as we can at that time. Even if it's not the whole of the environmental audit, it might only be 5 or 6 sections, it might only be 4 sections of social, whatever we can, we will certify them for what they are doing well now, and we'll give them a follow-on improvement plan to continue working to improve on the other areas. And that includes ongoing partnership with SLF for 2 years, which gives them access to all the tools and the guidance that they need. That's the project. So far, we started in Africa, and we have now commenced work in Indonesia. So Africa, we are starting the audits. I mentioned the PAVs earlier in the benchmarking section. The preliminary assessment visits, 8 of them have been done in Africa, 8 of them have been done in Indonesia, 1 has been done in Bangladesh. The 8 that we have done in Africa, the audits for those will take place during the month of January and during the month of March next year. They're already scheduled. Indonesia, we have done all the preliminary assessment visits in the last quarter of this year. We will start their audits in the second quarter of next year. So they now have this intervening 6-month period between their preliminary assessment visits, which took place in September and October, and their audits, which will take place during May, June, July next year. We're then hoping that India will come online in the early part of next year to start the beginning of that process with them. And then we'll follow up later next year with whichever geography we decide on for Latin America. It might be Mexico at the moment, but actually there is a train of thought to say maybe we should go into South America. But we'll see. That's still to be determined for the second half of 2026. Alongside the training project, we're also supporting LHCA with their LCA work. They have done a lot of work on LCAs within the livestock farming sector, and they're now working to add the tannery data to that so that we can start creating more concise data. So we are supporting them with anonymized data from our dashboards with approval from our partners. There is a facility actually in place that if any of our partners want to have a benchmark feedback from the team in the States, they can opt to have their data sent without being anonymous, and then LHCA team would actually feedback to them how they fit in amongst all the other data sets they've got in terms of impact. But that's an ongoing piece of work. There is also potentially an add-on piece of work where we would add time to our standard audits to collect more data on behalf of LHCA. Now, obviously, if we do that, permission obviously has to be sought from any tannery that we're going out to do an audit for, that they would be willing to have some extra time with us. And if they do extra work with us for this purpose, then that would be paid for by LHCA. The tanneries obviously would not be at any expense for that. But that again is an extension piece of work that we're looking to see whether or not we could collect some more information at the point that we're at an audit anyway that might support this development work. And LHCA alongside this have set up an independent organisation now, the Data Integrity Institute, to drive the work forward, and there is a governance team set up behind that. Many of our industry experts are on that board. So that's the LCA work with LHCA. I've just got 2 more pieces really to go through. The first is the Leather Trace project in Bangladesh. This is a SMEP funded project, and it is, I just need to check the time. Yeah, we're okay, we've got a few more minutes. This funded project is to help to assist tanneries in Bangladesh to be able to meet traceability requirements. You know, if you think about a region like Bangladesh or Pakistan or some of these other regions, they have very small local farming. They don't have structured farming and slaughtering, industrial farming and slaughtering as we know it, which makes it very difficult. So how are they meant to meet the requirements of EUDR, notwithstanding the simplification? And actually, we've developed a system whereby we know that local huts, local centres, collect from a very small geography. So if we can plot that geography of that catchment area, then we have our starting point to be able to say, okay, we know that the material has all come from this small community here, it's gone into this hut, and from this hut it's been sold out to these tanneries, and then we get something that we can really work in. So the solution itself has a desktop element and it has a mobile app. The mobile app is for the guys that are out in the field, and it will talk to desktop systems within tanneries. All of the little huts and the small local slaughterhouses, the meat shops, they're all listed. So they're all listed and registered, and all of their geographies are known around that. And then we can link. So they just go in, they pick the slaughterhouse or the hut that they're buying from, and it hooks together. It's quite a simple system, but it's really effective. It's already in piloting. We've had the first batches of leather that have gone out that have QR codes that link to this system now. As part of the work as well, we're creating policy recommendations, a policy blueprint to engage government, to get them to support at a local level with resource to enable this. As with all these things, when we're working in a pilot, we need the ongoing resource to enable it to come to fruition. There is a similar project that's been taking place in Pakistan. And actually, we're going to be pulling together a joint event to discuss similarities and commonalities across the systems that have been created, and see if we can improve them even more by working a bit more closely together. You can see at the bottom of this slide here, there is a consortium of organisations that are working. The universities in the UK, ourselves in the UK, and then Sarah Bangladesh are the IT company, and Idea Tree are the local organisation in Dhaka that do the stakeholder engagement and the fulfilment of the project. Together, we all work really well as a team with different disciplinary areas, which has been great. So that work will continue for the first half of next year, and we'll be doing some stakeholder engagement on that, which I hope you'll all come along to when we get those dates. One of the events will be at Lineapelli. We're planning to do some stakeholder engagement at the Pakistan Mega Leather Fair at the end of January, and we will be holding an end of project wrap-up session either in London or in Birmingham here in the UK around May-June time. But that's been a really worthwhile project to be part of, with a lot of learnings that can be replicated, I think. The final piece on here is GIZ. I did a lot of work with them in 23 and 24, which resulted in 6 facilities in Africa, Zambia, Namibia, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, having audits. Those audits are up for renewal in 2026, and GIZ have committed to funding the re-audits for these facilities, because again, this is part of the problem. We can do really good things under a funded project, but then when facilities are left to then try and follow up on that and maintain it, they sometimes don't have the resource to enable that to happen. So I'm really pleased that GIZ are going to fund these re-audits in 2026, and we'll keep you updated on that next year. I have got a couple of questions in the chat. Let me just see if there's anything there to answer before we move on quickly. No, I think it's just a couple of hellos. That's good. Okay. So finally, just a bit of a look ahead. In terms of demographics, we know our biggest successes as an organisation are in those less advanced regions. What I would say here is that's so important, but it is just important that our leading lights in the industry are also engaged, because they show the way. So, you know, we've always maintained that we need to do this from both ends. We need our guys that are at the top of the game because they lead the way, but we also need to be uplifting those guys at the bottom end of the ladder. So our largest successes have been in those less advanced regions. We were already working with them from the start, but the visibility has been really heightened through the project work, and I hope that continues. because there's a definite demand for it. And one of the outcomes of that work in Africa particularly is that we are working to create an SLF office in ALPI, in the African Leather and Leather Products Institute in Ethiopia, are going to have dedicated manpower out of their office that will be the SLF support for the region. Because with the best will in the world, we can't be everywhere all of the time. And it makes perfect sense that we have people geographically located close to where the work is that can support and help them to maintain improvement. So that is a model that we really do want to expand into other high producing areas, that we have more local level support, and certainly are enabling them through support from our end. And of course, we want to further expand coverage and adoption to keep scaling this work up, because there's a definite need for it, and it helps everybody and helps the industry. Brand engagement remains a key ingredient for scaling the work. There are a few things that are happening right now that are directly attributable to brand input with us. So we definitely see brand engagement as a key ingredient that we want to foster for the future. Our immediate priority focus will remain on accreditation in 2026, focusing on the work that Stuart updated you all on. And we also want to increase the training, workshop visibility and opportunities, because I think that many partners don't realize that as part of their partnership, we can provide 2 training workshops a year for them free of charge. And I don't think people are taking that up enough, maybe because they don't know about it. So we need to be more visible about those opportunities as well. And we want to continue to support intergovernmental organisations and other NGOs and organisations with project opportunities, as long as they have this same end goal of improvement for the long term. Continuing to lead the way with integrity and strength of purpose to support the leather industry without commercial bias or gain. We are a not-for-profit, and we will continue to work to support in the right way for the right reasons. And my final slide is just a quick overview of the events that are coming up. I've already mentioned we are going to be at the Pakistan Mega Leather Fair in January. We'll be at Linear Pelly in February, and we'll be holding our stakeholder meeting there on the afternoon of day 1. And we'll also be holding a session on the Leather Trace project as part of that. We'll be at APLF in March, and then we'll be looking towards Linear Pelly again in September. There will be this Bangladesh stakeholder event in London, but we don't have the details on that yet. And I'm sure there'll be other events through the year, but those are where we know we're at for now. And with that, I will say thank you to everyone on this call and all of our partners, because we can't do our work without you guys. And whether that's through audit fees, whether it's through partnership subscriptions, or whether it's through project revenue that comes in, we can only work with your support. But you can be assured that your support means that we can support in turn. Wheels within wheels, we will continue. We're committed to the work that we do, and we will continue to work internally in industry, but also with those external agencies for the better good, so that we can support industry in the best way. And with that, I'll throw it open. I'm going to stop sharing slides so I can see you all. Does anybody have any questions? No? Nice to see some faces now. Okay. If there are no questions, and I can't see any, I will say thank you. Look, I'm bang on. That must be a first. It is exactly 3 o'clock. I think that must be the first ever, because we all know I like to talk.
It's because of the chairman, that's what it is, you see, Deborah.
Good chairing, that's what it is. All right, well, look, thank you for joining us. I will send a link to the recording to you and to those that couldn't make it. And please get in touch if you need anything. Otherwise, we'll be in touch with all of you at some point in the new year, I'm sure. And I'll take this opportunity to wish you all a very joyous Christmas and a healthy, happy, and very successful 2026. I think we all need one, don't we? a good 2026 to look forward to. Yeah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
All
Rachel.
right. Really nice to see you all.
Just from the chair, can I just, on behalf of everybody, Deborah, thank you personally for all your hard work, because you're the engine room for this project, and I think everybody around the world appreciates that, and we encourage you to please carry on, keep going. But it's very much appreciated, with all sincerity. God bless you and your family.
Blushing a bit now. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, Reg. Thank you, everyone. And we'll catch up in the new year.
Best season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye-bye.
holidays.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks. Happy Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everyone. Take care.
Nice to see you, Guillermo. I'm going to just stop recording.